I just don't know what to do anymore.
For years, I was invisible to my own son. He saw me as nothing more than a relic of hard work and sacrifice, a man who had nothing to offer beyond the grind of daily life. I gave him everything, but all I got in return was distance, dismissal, and indifference. I spent countless nights questioning what I did wrong, wondering why the one person I loved most in the world had turned his back on me. The pain of being overlooked, of having my worth ignored, slowly ate away at me. But instead of drowning in that hurt, I made a choice that would change everything. I decided to stop waiting for his approval. I decided to stop hoping for validation. Instead, I poured every ounce of my energy into building something for myself. Something real, something that proved I was worth more than what he had seen. I started small, with nothing but a dream and the will to make it happen. But what I created, what I built with my own hands, would leave him speechless. It was a success born from rejection, a legacy made from pain. And when he finally came back, expecting me to welcome him with open arms, I showed him something far more valuable than forgiveness. I showed him what it looks like to rise from the ashes, to reclaim your dignity, and to build a life that no one can take away. This isn't just a story about family. It's a story about resilience, about proving that it's never too late to build the life you deserve, even when the people you love the most can't see it. So, stay with me. This story will make you believe that no matter how far you've fallen, you can always rise again. Ronald had always lived a life shaped by hard work and perseverance. Raised in a modest neighborhood, he had learned from an early age that nothing in life came easily. His parents had worked long hours in factories, struggling to make ends meet, but they instilled in him a sense of duty, of commitment, and of resilience. These lessons became his guiding principles. He was no stranger to sacrifice, whether it was skipping meals to ensure his son, Sam, had enough or putting in overtime at his job just to pay the bills. Ronald believed in the value of hard work, in the quiet satisfaction of building something with your own hands. He never expected life to be glamorous. He was used to the mundane routine, waking up before dawn, working through the day, and returning home at night to a small, simple house. His world was never about luxury. It was about survival, stability, and providing for his family. The kitchen table was a place of plans and decisions, often accompanied by the weight of responsibilities that came with raising a child alone. Ronald's wife, a woman he adored, had passed away when Sam was young, and from that moment, he made it his mission to give his son everything he could. His own dreams took a back seat, and everything he did was for Sam's future. But it wasn't just the physical work that wore on him. It was the emotional toll of trying to maintain a relationship with a son who seemed to grow more distant with each passing year. Sam had been a bright, ambitious boy once, eager to learn from his father. But as the years went by, something shifted. Sam's desire for independence became a chasm that seemed impossible to bridge. Ronald tried to fill that gap with advice, with support, with love. But Sam's world began to revolve around things Ronald couldn't understand: social status, money, popularity. He started distancing himself, rejecting his father's way of life in favor of a more glamorous existence. At first, it didn't sting. It was just part of growing up, he thought. Sam was finding his own path, and Ronald was proud of him for that. But as the months turned into years, the distance between them grew. Sam stopped calling, stopped checking in. When they did speak, his words were curt, his tone indifferent. Ronald, heartbroken and confused, couldn't fathom where it had gone wrong. He gave so much of himself to Sam, so much of his time, his energy, his soul, and yet none of it seemed to matter anymore. But Ronald wasn't the type to let things break him. When his wife passed, he had grieved, but he had moved forward. Now, the emotional weight of his son's neglect didn't crush him either. Instead, he focused on something he could control: himself. He refused to let this situation define him. The small house where he had raised Sam was quiet now. The walls, once filled with the sound of a child's laughter and the warmth of family dinners, felt cold and empty. But instead of succumbing to the loneliness, Ronald decided to take matters into his own hands. He'd spent his life building things for others, his family, his community, his job, but he had never really built anything for himself. He'd never allowed himself to dream beyond a routine. Now, with Sam gone and no one to answer to but himself, Ronald started a plan. He knew nothing about running a business, but he knew enough about hard work to take that first step. He enrolled in evening classes, learning about entrepreneurship, small business management, and finance. With every passing day, he put in the hours, studying after work, experimenting with small ideas, and failing again and again. But each failure only strengthened his resolve. He didn't care how long it took, how many obstacles he had to overcome. This was his chance to do something for himself. Ronald's small business began in the most humble of ways. He started by selling handmade furniture, simple, sturdy pieces he crafted himself. At first, there were just a few local customers who appreciated the quality and the craftsmanship. Slowly, word spread and demand grew. He found a small storefront on the edge of town and used what little savings he had to turn it into a place of business. The work was grueling and the progress was slow, but he never stopped. Each new piece of furniture was a symbol of his determination, a testament to his ability to build something from nothing. As Ronald's business began to grow, so did his confidence. He no longer felt like the man lost in the shadows of his family's expectations. He was his own person, creating something of value that wasn't dependent on anyone else's approval. He worked long hours, often until midnight, and slowly but surely, his hard work began to pay off. He built a reputation in the community, and his customer base expanded. While all this was happening, Sam was off on his own journey, living a life Ronald had never imagined for him. The boy who once relied on him was now chasing after the fast-paced, high-living world of luxury and materialism. Ronald watched from a distance, not knowing whether Sam ever thought of him. And yet, he didn't care as much as he thought he would. There was something about building his own success, about finding his own strength, that made him realize he no longer needed validation from anyone, least of all his son. And so, Ronald continued to work, to build, to grow. In the quiet solitude of his new life, he began to feel a sense of pride and peace he had never known before. He had built something solid, something meaningful, and it had all started from nothing. Ronald's newfound peace, however, would soon be disrupted by the very person he had spent years sacrificing for, his son, Sam. For years, Sam had been absent from his life, both physically and emotionally. Ronald had accepted that. He had come to terms with the silence, the absence of a son he had once hoped would carry on his legacy. But Sam's indifference cut deeper than he had ever let on. It wasn't just the lack of communication that hurt. It was the feeling of being discarded, of being forgotten. Sam's disinterest in him was the final blow to the idea that family would always be there to lean on, to fall back on. Ronald had learned to survive without Sam's love. He built his life with his own two hands, but the wound left by Sam's rejection never fully healed. There were moments when it would hit him, sometimes in the quiet of the evening, when he'd hear a father and son laugh together in the park, or see his son proudly show his father his accomplishments. The emptiness of those moments reminded him of what was lost. But just when he thought he had moved on, that he had created a life on his own terms, Sam unexpectedly reappeared. It started with a phone call, a call that Ronald had not been prepared for. The ring of the phone was like a jolt to his system, an echo from the past. He answered cautiously, the familiar feeling of disappointment hanging in the air. "Hey, Dad, it's me. Sam." Ronald's heart skipped. He hadn't heard from Sam in over 2 years. The voice on the other end was familiar, but distant, as though Sam had become someone else in the time they'd been apart. His tone was casual, almost too casual. "I've been thinking a lot lately, and I want to check in. How are you doing?" Ronald couldn't help but feel a rush of conflicting emotions, surprise, anger, relief, and something deeper, something that felt like hope. But hope was quickly tempered by the bitter reality that Sam had only called now, after so many years. What had changed? Why now? "I'm fine," Ronald replied, his voice steady, though his insides were a storm of emotions. "I've been doing well, building the business. Things are moving forward. That's good, Sam said, the pause on the other end of the line longer than it should have been. I was actually wondering if we could meet up. Maybe catch up. I've been thinking a lot about everything. About us. Ronald's instinct screamed at him to say no, to hang up, to not let Sam back in. But he didn't. He had worked too hard to build something, to rebuild his life, to let this moment slip away without an answer. He'd spent years hoping for this very thing, though he'd also learned to guard his heart. Still, he was tempted. I suppose we can meet, Ronald said, keeping his voice even. But let's keep it simple. Sam agreed to meet at a small cafe in town, a neutral place where they could sit down and talk without the weight of family history pressing down on them. The meeting felt awkward from the moment Sam arrived. Ronald couldn't help but notice how different Sam looked. Dressed in expensive clothes, his posture leaning toward the confident swagger of someone who had made it. He no longer seemed like the boy Ronald had raised. This new version of Sam wasn't someone who needed his father anymore. He wasn't even sure he wanted him. They sat across from each other, the silence thick between them. Sam fidgeted with his coffee cup, avoiding eye contact. He finally spoke, his voice carrying a note of uncertainty. I know I haven't been around, and I want to apologize. I've been caught up in my own life, and I didn't make the effort to keep in touch. I guess I just got distracted. Sam paused, looking down at his hands, as if trying to find the right words. But I want to make it right. I want to know what you've been up to. Ronald felt a surge of anger, but he quickly tamped it down. The apology, if it could even be called that, was empty. It was the kind of apology given by someone who wanted to ease their own conscience, not someone who truly understood the depth of the pain they had caused. It was a conversation he had hoped would never happen, because deep down, he knew it wasn't really about reconciliation. It was about Sam trying to ease his own guilt, not understanding that things were no longer the way they had been. You've been gone for a long time, Ronald said, his tone firm but controlled. You've missed a lot, Sam, and it's not just about the years. It's about what you've taken for granted, what I gave, what I did for you, and what you never appreciated. Sam shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't argue. Instead, he seemed to shrink under Ronald's gaze, as though he had suddenly realized the weight of his actions. Ronald had always been the quiet, steadfast type, never one to raise his voice, but the quiet power of his words now felt like a revelation. I didn't come here to fight, Sam said quietly. I just want to understand. I've been so focused on my own life that I forgot about what really mattered. Ronald paused, looking at his son. For the first time in a long while, he wondered if this was truly an opportunity for growth. But he was no fool. He knew that this wasn't just about Sam's realization. This was a test, one that would show whether or not his son could truly see him for who he had become, not for who he had once been. And in that moment, Ronald knew the truth. Sam had no idea what he was about to face. As they sat there in silence, the conflict had already begun to take shape. The emotional chasm between father and son had been widened by years of neglect, and no single conversation could bridge that gap. The path ahead would not be easy. The stakes had been raised, not just for Ronald's relationship with Sam, but for the integrity of everything Ronald had built on his own terms. And for the first time in years, Ronald was forced to confront a truth that he had buried deep within himself. His son had returned, but he wasn't the only one who had changed. The air between Ronald and Sam grew heavier with every passing moment. The cafe, which had once been a place for friendly chats and comforting conversations, now felt like a battlefield. Sam shifted in his seat, his eyes darting around the room as though searching for an escape, but Ronald could sense that the escape wasn't physical. It was emotional. Sam was drowning in guilt, but he wasn't ready to admit it yet. He had come back to his father, but he hadn't truly come back to the relationship. He hadn't fully realized the damage he had done. Ronald leaned back in his chair, his gaze unwavering as he studied Sam. The boy, the young man, who had once looked up to him, now sat in front of him, a stranger. Sam had always been impulsive, chasing after what was shiny and new, only to discard it when the novelty wore off. Ronald had seen it before, back when Sam had chosen his friends, his lifestyle, over the values that Ronald had tried so hard to instill in him. But this was different. This wasn't just a phase. This was the culmination of years of neglect. "Do you even understand, Sam?" Ronald asked, his voice low but firm. "Do you understand what it's like to give everything for someone, only to be ignored when you need it the most?" His words hung in the air, sharp and pointed. "Do you know what it feels like to be abandoned by your own flesh and blood? To love someone so deeply, only to watch them walk away without a second thought?" Sam's eyes darted to the table, unable to meet his father's gaze. His fingers nervously tapped against his coffee cup. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Dad," Sam said, his voice small, though the edge in it suggested he was defensive, not remorseful. "I was just living my life. I thought you'd be okay." Ronald's heart twisted. The audacity of the statement hit him like a slap in the face. Sam thought he'd be okay? That's all he'd ever done. Tried to survive, to thrive, to make it on his own. But no one had ever truly considered the sacrifices he'd made, the years of struggle, the quiet loneliness. Sam hadn't even bothered to check in, to see how his father was holding up. He had lived his life as though Ronald's existence was incidental, as though the man who had given him everything was somehow less important than whatever world Sam had been chasing. "Living your life," Ronald repeated bitterly. "Is that what you call it? Running away from the people who actually care about you? You didn't even give me a chance to be a part of your life. And now you're sitting here, talking like you've done nothing wrong." Sam opened his mouth to protest, but Ronald held up a hand. "I'm not done. You talk about how you've been living your life, but have you ever stopped to think about how I lived mine while you were off doing God knows what?" The question hung heavily in the air. "While you were out there building your perfect world, I was here, working my fingers to the bone, struggling to make ends meet, trying to build something that could make you proud. I never once asked for anything in return. Not one thing." Sam's face shifted from defensive to something else, something that resembled a tinge of guilt. He opened his mouth to speak, but hesitated, as though the words were stuck in his throat. Ronald could see it, the frustration, the confusion, the recognition that things had gotten far too complicated for a simple apology to fix. It wasn't just about his father's pain. It was about the wall Sam had built around himself, a wall that had grown higher and thicker with each year of neglect. "I didn't know it was this bad," Sam finally muttered, almost to himself. His eyes were cast downward, but the weight of Ronald's words seemed to be sinking in. But there it was, the first crack in the facade. Ronald didn't know whether to feel relief or anger. Was this just another empty admission? Was Sam finally starting to understand? Or was this just another moment of empty guilt, the kind of guilt that came when someone finally realized the consequences of their actions, but didn't know how to fix it? Ronald took a deep breath. "The problem, Sam, is not that you didn't know. The problem is that you never cared to know. You never cared to ask, to show up, to even make an effort. And now you come here, after all this time, expecting everything to be okay? It doesn't work like that. It's too late for that." The words stung like a harsh slap, but they needed to be said. Sam needed to understand that Ronald had moved on. It wasn't that he didn't care about Sam anymore. It was that he had learned to live without the expectation of reciprocation, of love. He had built his life not for his son's approval, but for his own. It was a hard lesson to learn, but one that Ronald had embraced with every ounce of his being. Sam was quiet now, looking down at his coffee, the guilt swirling in his mind. But for the first time in this conversation, Ronald didn't feel the need to fill the silence. The truth was out. The damage had been done. Sam had to decide whether he was going to take responsibility for the years of neglect, or if he was going to continue down the same path of self-interest and abandonment. For Ronald, the stakes were clear. This wasn't about repairing a broken relationship. It was about protecting what he had built, about honoring the work and strength it had taken to get there. And if Sam couldn't see that, then perhaps it was time for him to finally let go. The silence between them was deafening. Sam, sitting across from Ronald, seemed to shrink further into himself with each passing moment. The weight of his father's words, their sharpness, their truth, pressed down on him like a heavy blanket. He had never been good at facing the consequences of his actions. It was easier to ignore, to deflect, to hide behind his own excuses. But now, as he sat in front of Ronald, The man who had given everything for him, the walls he had built around himself were starting to crumble. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He wanted to say something that would make this moment go away, something that would fix the damage he had caused, but deep down he knew there was nothing he could say that would make up for the years he had neglected his father. Nothing he could say would erase the hurt, the loneliness, the deep sense of betrayal Ronald must have felt. The realization that the man who had always been there for him had been left behind in his pursuit of wealth and status hit him like a cold slap. "I thought," Sam began, but the words caught in his throat. "I thought you'd be okay without me. I thought I was doing what I needed to do for my life, you know? I didn't realize how much I hurt you, Dad. I didn't realize." Ronald's eyes, once filled with hope, now seemed distant. Eyes that had seen too much, eyes that had carried the weight of unspoken sacrifices. He could see it now, the regret in Sam's voice, the guilt in his eyes. But it was too little, too late. Ronald's heart ached, but he couldn't bring himself to soften his stance. Not this time. Not after everything he had endured. "You didn't realize?" Ronald's voice was steady, but his words cut through the air. "Sam, you didn't just forget me. You chose to ignore me. You chose to shut me out while you chase your dream of a life filled with luxury and things I could never give you. You didn't think about what I was going through. You didn't think about how it felt to be left behind. For years, I was here alone, working hard to build something I thought you might one day be proud of. But when I needed you, when I needed someone to stand by me, you were gone. And you didn't even look back." Sam recoiled at the harshness of Ronald's words. His mind raced, scrambling to find some explanation, some way to make it all right again. But nothing came. He had no excuse for abandoning his father. He had no justification for leaving Ronald to carry the weight of his own life, while Sam lived as though his father were a non-factor in his world. "I don't know what to say," Sam whispered, his voice breaking. "I can't take back the years I've wasted. I can't undo the hurt I've caused. I don't know how to make it up to you, Dad." Ronald took a long breath, steadying himself. He could see Sam's struggle, the pain in his eyes as he tried to grapple with the weight of his past mistakes. But there was something inside Ronald that had hardened over the years, a part of him that no longer needed to seek validation from someone who had repeatedly let him down. This wasn't about making it right for Sam. It was about Ronald's own growth, his own sense of worth. And in this moment, he realized he had already moved on from needing his son's approval. "You can't make it up to me, Sam," Ronald said softly, his voice filled with quiet resolve. "I've already let go of the idea that you'll ever be the son I wanted you to be. And I've accepted that. But that doesn't mean you get to come back into my life and expect everything to go back to the way it was. You don't get a free pass." Sam's face flushed with shame, but he didn't look away. The weight of his father's words was suffocating, but it was a weight he deserved to carry. The truth of what he had done, how much he had taken his father for granted, was beginning to sink in. He had always thought of himself as the one chasing a better life. But now, as he sat there with Ronald, he realized he had been chasing emptiness. His success, his material wealth, had never filled the hole inside him. "You're right," Sam finally said, his voice trembling. "I've been selfish. I've been so caught up in what I thought I needed to do to make my life better that I didn't realize I was losing the one thing that mattered most. I wasn't there when you needed me, and I can't undo that." Ronald nodded, the emotional weight of the conversation pressing on his chest, but he refused to let it overwhelm him. This wasn't about closure for Sam. It was about setting boundaries, about making it clear that there were consequences to actions, even when the other person didn't see them coming. "I've built something here, Sam," Ronald said, looking around the cafe with a sense of pride. "I've built a life. It wasn't easy, and it didn't come without sacrifice. But I did it, and I did it without you. I did it for me." Sam sat back, his eyes wide with surprise. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected his father to be so resolute, so unaffected by his apology. The realization hit him hard. This wasn't a reconciliation. This wasn't a moment where everything would magically fall back into place. This was about his father reclaiming his own dignity, his own strength. And Sam had no choice but to respect that. Ronald was no longer the man who had silently waited for his son's approval. He was a man who had found his own path, built his own success, and, in the process, discovered his own worth. And if Sam couldn't see that, then perhaps it was time for both of them to truly move on. The weight of the moment hung between them, thick and suffocating, as Sam tried to process what was happening. The reality of what his father had said was starting to hit him all at once. Ronald had spent years building a life without him, without the need for validation or approval from his son. That was the part that struck Sam the hardest. His father no longer needed him in the way he had once thought. Sam had always believed that if he ever returned, if he ever reached out, Ronald would be waiting, arms open, ready to forgive and forget. But that wasn't what he was seeing now. Ronald had moved on, and in doing so, had become someone Sam didn't recognize. The man sitting across from him wasn't the same one who had patiently worked through every hardship, the one who had lived and breathed for his family. This was someone different, a man who had found strength in his solitude, who had rediscovered his sense of self-worth through his own work, his own success. And Sam could see it in his father's eyes. Ronald wasn't just emotionally distant. He was no longer attached to the person he had once been. He had rebuilt himself. The realization hit Sam like a ton of bricks. It wasn't about his father forgiving him or accepting him back into his life. It wasn't about undoing the years of neglect or the hurt he had caused. No, this was about Ronald, about the quiet strength he had found in himself, about how he had built something real, something worth respecting, something far greater than any material success Sam could claim for himself. Sam started, his voice faltering, trying to find the right words, but his throat felt tight. You really don't need me, do you? Ronald looked at him then, his gaze steady, but softer than before. I never needed you, Sam. I always wanted you. There's a difference. Wanting someone is different from needing them. I spent so many years thinking I needed your approval, your respect, your love. But I've learned to live without it. I've built a life that stands on its own, without needing to rely on anyone else to define it. And that's something you have to understand. Sam's heart sank. He thought he had come here to make things right, to earn his place back in his father's life. He thought he had been the one with the power to change things, to fix the broken relationship. But the truth, the harsh truth, was that it wasn't in his hands anymore. Ronald had done the unthinkable. He had built a life of dignity, success, and strength all on his own. And in doing so, he had rendered Sam's apology almost insignificant. I thought I could come back and fix things, Sam whispered, his voice cracking. I thought I could make it right. But now I realize it's not that simple, is it? Ronald shook his head slowly, his expression contemplative. It was never about you fixing things, Sam. It was about me learning to fix myself. You weren't the one I needed to make things right with. I had to make it right with me. And that's the difference. If you ever want a chance at rebuilding something with me, you need to understand that you can't expect to fix things with me before you fix things with yourself. The words stung, but Sam could see the truth in them. He had spent so much of his life thinking that his actions had to be about him, about what he wanted, what he needed, what he deserved. He had never once thought about how his actions had affected others, how his pursuit of his own life had destroyed the connections he once held dear. He had never considered that in his quest for success and happiness, he had lost the very thing that had once meant the most to him, his relationship with his father. I've spent all this time trying to get ahead, chasing success, thinking that it would fill the emptiness, Sam confessed, his voice raw, vulnerable. But I've never felt more alone in my life. And now I see that I've pushed away the only person who ever really cared about me. I took you for granted, Dad, and I didn't even realize it until now. Ronald's eyes softened, but his resolve remained strong. Sam, I can't fix the past, and neither can you. What you've done, what I've done is done. We can't go back and change it. But you have the chance to change the way you move forward. You don't get a free pass just because you realize what you've done. You have to prove that you've learned something from this, not just tell me you have. If you want a place in my life, it's not going to come easily. Sam felt a strange mix of gratitude and despair. His father wasn't offering him a second chance on a silver platter. He wasn't going to simply forgive him and pretend like nothing had happened. But there was something in his father's words that made Sam realize just how much he had underestimated the depth of his father's strength, just how little he had understood the power of independence and self-respect. Do you think there's a chance for us?" Sam asked, his voice quiet, almost pleading. "I don't know what I'm asking, but I need to know if you think I can ever earn your trust again." Ronald didn't answer immediately. He let the question hang in the air, not rushing to offer an answer. Instead, he stared at Sam, as if weighing the truth of his words, measuring his son's sincerity. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Ronald spoke. "I don't know, but if you're serious about making it right, you'll show me. Not with words, but with actions. And that's where it starts. Not with me, with you." It was in that moment, as the weight of Ronald's revelation settled in, that Sam understood. His father had stopped needing him, but he hadn't stopped wanting him. However, that desire to rebuild their relationship would no longer come at the cost of his father's self-respect. It was now on Sam to prove he could be the man Ronald had always hoped he would be. And for the first time in years, Sam felt the stirring of hope, not because of anything his father might give him, but because of what he could give himself. The tension in the cafe had reached its peak, and Sam could feel the storm inside him begin to rage. He had come here seeking answers, hoping for some form of redemption, but all he was getting was the bitter truth. His father wasn't waiting for him to return to his arms. He wasn't asking for Sam's apology to fill the empty space. Ronald had already found peace on his own terms, and Sam was left to face the reality of what that meant. The weight of his father's quiet strength pressed down on him like a 1,000-ton boulder. Sam's mind raced, his heart pounding in his chest. How could he have been so blind? For years, he had assumed that his success, his wealth, would be the answer to everything he thought he was missing. But in that moment, he understood the truth his father had known all along. True fulfillment came from something deeper, something more enduring than material success. It was about integrity. It was about relationships. It was about doing the work, not just reaping the rewards. He couldn't change the past. He couldn't erase the years he had wasted, the love he had neglected. But what he could do, what he had to do, was show his father that he was capable of more than just selfishness, that he could grow, that he could learn from the mistakes he had made. Sam leaned forward, his voice trembling. "Dad, I get it now. I get what you were trying to show me. All this time, I thought success was about what I could buy, what I could achieve for myself. But I see now that it's about something much bigger. It's about what we leave behind, not just in things, but in people, in love, in trust, in strength. You've shown me that, and I've been blind to it." Ronald remained silent, his eyes steady, but his face softened just enough to signal that he was listening, waiting for his son to continue. Sam could feel the intensity of the moment, the gravity of the choice before him. This wasn't just about making amends with his father. It was about making a choice to rebuild the life he had torn apart, to rebuild himself. "I've taken so much from you, Dad. I've hurt you, I've abandoned you, and I've lived my life without even considering how it affected you. But now I'm here, and I'm not asking for your forgiveness just because I want it. I'm asking because I want to prove to you and to myself that I can change, that I can be the man you always believed I could be. I don't want to be that selfish person anymore." For the first time in years, Sam felt his own emotions bubbling to the surface. Guilt, regret, but also a strange sense of hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for him to make things right, to fix what had been broken. Not by just saying the words, but by showing his father that he was serious. He wasn't asking for immediate forgiveness. He wasn't asking for everything to go back to how it was. What he wanted was to start anew, not with his father's approval, but with his own. But Ronald's response was slow in coming, and Sam felt his heart sink. Had he said too much? Had he overstepped? Maybe it was too late. Maybe all the words in the world couldn't undo the damage that had been done. He had thought that by showing his vulnerability, by admitting his faults, he could somehow win his father back. But now, sitting in the tense silence that followed, he realized that this wasn't about winning anything at all. It was about the truth, about the hard, painful truth that actions spoke louder than words. "Dad, I know I can't change the past, but I don't want to keep living like this. I don't want to keep running from what I've done. I want to be a part of your life again, but not in the way I've been. I don't want you to feel like I'm just here to take something from you. I want to give something back." Ronald's eyes never wavered. He looked at Sam for a long moment, and in that silence, everything seemed to shift. It was as though the years of distance, of hurt, of abandonment, were all suspended in the air between them, waiting to be resolved. Sam held his breath, bracing for whatever his father might say, but what Ronald said next wasn't what Sam expected. "You can't give me something back, Sam," Ronald said quietly. "You can't change the past, and you don't need to prove anything to me. The only thing you need to prove is to yourself. Can you change? Can you show that you're serious about the life you want to build from here on out? It's not about fixing what's broken between us. It's about fixing what's broken inside you. And that's where it starts." Sam swallowed hard, his emotions threatening to overwhelm him. The words hurt, yes, but they also opened something in him, a door he hadn't realized was there, a chance to change, to prove himself, to rebuild what he had torn down. This wasn't a moment of absolution. It wasn't a magical fix to years of mistakes. It was the beginning of something new. A chance. "I'll show you, Dad," Sam said, his voice steady, though his heart was racing. "I'll show you I can change." Ronald nodded once, his face a mask of quiet approval. "That's all I need to hear, Sam. Now you've got to make it count." And in that moment, Sam realized that his journey wasn't just about winning his father's forgiveness. It was about winning his own self-respect. And he knew, deep down, that it was going to be the hardest, most rewarding thing he had ever done. Sam sat back in his chair, the weight of his father's words echoing in his mind. It was like a spark had been ignited within him, and he couldn't ignore the heat. For the first time, he truly understood that the burden of change wasn't on Ronald. It wasn't about trying to fix the broken pieces between them. It wasn't about making his father feel better. It was about Sam, about him facing his own truth, about proving that he was capable of transformation, not for anyone else, but for himself. But as that realization settled deep within him, another, more daunting thought began to surface. Could he actually do it? Could he change? Sam had spent most of his life running from responsibility, from accountability, from the consequences of his actions. It was always easier to live in the fantasy of success, in the glossy image of the life he had built, than to face the reality of what he had lost. But now, sitting in front of his father, he knew it wasn't enough to just say the right words. It wasn't enough to apologize and expect everything to magically fix itself. He had to prove it. He had to show up, not just for Ronald, but for the person he was becoming. The silence between them lingered, heavy and expectant. Sam felt the heat of his father's steady gaze. Ronald had given him a chance, one that wasn't guaranteed. Sam knew he wasn't just being handed forgiveness. This wasn't some sentimental gesture. His father was offering him a chance to step into his own life, to rebuild what had been broken, but only if Sam was willing to fight for it. "You're right," Sam said quietly, his voice more certain now. "I can't change the past, but I can start over. I can start right now. I can show you who I really am, not the person I've been, but the person I want to be. And I'm willing to work for it." Ronald didn't say anything at first, but there was a flicker in his eyes, a hint of something. Sam wasn't sure if it was hope or maybe even pride, but he saw something there, something he hadn't seen in a long time. It was as if his father was waiting for this moment to come, for Sam to finally come to terms with the reality of who he was and who he could become. "You'll need to show me more than just words, Sam," Ronald finally said, his voice calm but firm. "It's not just about saying you can change, it's about doing it. Prove it. And it starts with yourself, not me." Sam's heart clenched at the finality in Ronald's words. It wasn't an easy thing to hear, but it was the truth. His father had never been one to give out empty promises, and he wasn't going to start now. Sam would have to prove that he wasn't the same person who had walked away, the same person who had ignored the love and sacrifice of the man sitting across from him. If he truly wanted to rebuild his relationship with Ronald, he would have to earn it. "I will," Sam said, his voice low but resolute. "I will show you. I won't let you down again." Ronald nodded, his expression unreadable. It wasn't a smile, but it wasn't a rejection either. It was something in between, a gesture of acknowledgement of trust. It was as if Ronald knew that Sam's journey was just beginning and that it would be full of challenges. But for the first time, Sam felt like he had the strength to face them. The air between them shifted, but it wasn't the same tension that had weighed on their conversation before. It was the kind of quiet that only comes when two people understand something deeply without having to say it. Sam wasn't looking for approval anymore, and Ronald wasn't waiting for him to make up for the years that had passed. What they both needed was time, the time for Sam to prove his commitment, to show that he could change and that he was worthy of a second chance. "Thank you, Dad," Sam said, his voice thick with emotion, "for not giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself." Ronald's expression softened, and for the first time in this whole conversation, there was a glimpse of the father Sam had once known, the one who had loved him unconditionally, who had sacrificed so much for him. But this time, Sam knew it was different. It wasn't the unconditional love of someone who would excuse all his faults. It was a love that required something more. It was a love that came with expectations, with respect, and with a deep understanding that actions spoke louder than words. "You've got a long road ahead of you, Sam," Ronald said, his voice steady but warm. "But if you're ready, I'm here. I'll be here to watch you build the life you've always wanted. Just don't expect me to hand it to you. You got to earn it, just like I did." Sam nodded, his heart pounding, but this time it wasn't from fear, it was from determination. This wasn't the end of their journey. It was the beginning of something new. The path ahead would be difficult, but Sam was ready. For the first time in his life, he felt like he had a purpose that went beyond himself. The cafe, once a place of tension and confrontation, now felt like a place of quiet resolution. Sam didn't know what the future would hold, but for the first time in years, he felt like he was ready to face it, ready to build a life worthy of his father's respect. And that, he realized, was where his real journey would begin. The days that followed the conversation in the cafe were a blur for Sam, a whirlwind of emotions, realizations, and an overwhelming sense of urgency to prove himself, not just to Ronald, but to himself. For years, he had lived in a world where his actions were driven by instant gratification, where he sought success through external validation, and where he had taken for granted the love of the people who had always been there. Now, the world felt different. The weight of responsibility had settled on his shoulders, and there was no turning back. Sam woke up each morning with a newfound clarity, a sense of purpose that he had never felt before. His thoughts were no longer consumed by the pursuit of more money, more status, more recognition. Instead, he focused on the deeper, more meaningful things that he had once overlooked. It was the small things that mattered now. Showing up on time, following through on his commitments, and treating people with respect, especially his father. It wasn't enough to say he had changed. He had to live the change. Over the next few weeks, Sam worked tirelessly to prove that he was serious. He took the time to repair the damage he had done, reaching out to old friends, reconnecting with people he had abandoned in the pursuit of his selfish dreams. But the most important relationship, the one that had been broken beyond repair for so long, was with his father. Sam knew it wasn't going to be easy. Ronald had set a high bar, and rightly so. The years of neglect couldn't be undone overnight. But Sam was determined to show his father that he was worthy of a second chance. He started by being present, showing up for the little things that mattered, like helping Ronald with the business. They spent evenings together, going over the finances, brainstorming ideas for expanding the small operation that had once been just a dream. Sam wasn't expecting Ronald to welcome him back with open arms. What he wanted was to be a part of his father's life again, not as someone who had to be forgiven, but as someone who was willing to put in the work. And slowly, step by step, things began to change. Sam watched as Ronald softened, just slightly, his demeanor becoming less guarded, less distant. They weren't back to the way things had been before, but there was something new emerging between them, a tentative bond built on mutual respect. Sam understood now that the journey of rebuilding wasn't about erasing the past. It was about creating something new, something stronger, based on what they had learned from their mistakes. One evening, as they sat together in Ronald's office, working through the details of a new product line for the business. Sam looked up at his father. Ronald was hunched over his desk, pencil in hand, deeply focused on the task at hand. Sam had always admired his father's work ethic, the way he could get lost in his projects, completely absorbed in the process. But now, as Sam watched him, something else was clear to him, a quiet strength that came not just from the work he did, but from the way he had lived his life. Ronald had never needed to prove anything to anyone. He had always been enough. "I'm proud of you, Sam," Ronald said, his voice soft but sincere. "I can see the change in you. You've come a long way." Sam felt a lump form in his throat. It wasn't a grand declaration of love or forgiveness, but it was exactly what he needed to hear. It was the acknowledgement of his effort, his growth, and the trust he had earned, one day at a time. He had never expected his father to give him a grand gesture, but this quiet approval meant more than anything. It wasn't just about the work they were doing together. It was about the trust being rebuilt between them, piece by piece. "I couldn't have done it without you, Dad," Sam said, his voice thick with emotion. "You show me what really matters. It's not about success. It's about doing the work, the real work, the hard work of being a good person, of rebuilding what you've lost, of never giving up on yourself, no matter how many times you've fallen." Ronald looked at him, his eyes softening just a fraction. "That's the truth, Sam, and I'll always be here, as long as you keep doing the work. You've learned more than I ever could have taught you with words. You've learned from your own journey." Sam nodded, knowing that the journey wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. The road to redemption was long, and there would be many more challenges ahead. But for the first time, Sam felt like he was on the right path. He had built something meaningful, not just a successful business, but a new sense of self-worth, a renewed connection with his father, and a deeper understanding of what it meant to truly live. As the days turned into weeks, and then into months, Sam continued to show up, to do the work, to be the man he knew he could be. He no longer needed his father's approval to feel validated. He had earned it through his actions, through his commitment to change. And in that, Sam found a peace he had never known before. In the end, it wasn't about the things Sam had lost or the mistakes he had made. It was about what he had found in the process, a renewed sense of purpose, a bond with his father that was built on respect, and a life that, for the first time, felt truly his own. The message for Sam was clear. The real success wasn't in the things you built, but in the way you rebuilt yourself. Have you ever made a mistake that you thought you couldn't come back from? Have you ever pushed someone away, only to realize too late how much they meant to you? Sam's story is a powerful reminder that it's never too late to change, to rebuild, and to reconnect. Whether it's with family, friends, or even with yourself, the journey to redemption starts with one simple choice: to take responsibility and make things right. What's stopping you from making that choice today? If you're ready to take that first step, whether it's apologizing, making amends, or committing to a better version of yourself, now is the time. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Take action now. Life doesn't give us many chances to make things right, but when we do, it's more than just about fixing what's broken. It's about growing into the person we're meant to be. So, I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to rebuild a relationship or prove that you've changed? Share your story in the comments below. Let's start a conversation about growth, redemption, and the power of second chances. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more powerful stories that inspire change. We're all on a journey, and together, we can support each other in our growth. Click that bell icon so you don't miss out on the next video, because every step forward, no matter how small, counts. Let's continue this journey of rebuilding and becoming the best versions of ourselves, one story at a time.